Hello, everyone. I'm Daniel, and I'm going to give you a little bit of my first thoughts about the Drowned City campaign. I have played through not the whole thing yet. I have played only through the first 5 scenarios, and I'll talk about which ones they were in my playthrough. But I'll just kind of get this out of the way that this is going to be full of lots of spoilers, so I'm going to give my, review or preview of my review without spoilers first. Just notably, like I said, only 5 scenarios, and I've been playing through a 3-player group on standard difficulty. So far, I like the campaign. However, it is a bit more on the basic side, a little bit more simple than what we've seen in the near past. So, Feast of Hemlock Vale that just came out last year, Scarlet Keys a few years before that. They are much, much more complex. Now, that is a plus and a minus. If you are used to Arkham Horror the card game and you want something new and exciting, something that you haven't really seen before, so far, I haven't seen anything new. It feels very uh, fun, but very much on the side of the players and the players' decks as telling the story rather than something from the scenarios themselves. Not to say that they're easy or difficult. Actually, they don't really feel either. They just sort of feel like they're there. But not a whole lot of compelling storytelling from the scenarios themselves. It is, again, feels more like you make the story yourself through something I'm going to talk about in a second, but in the spoiler filled version of this, but also just what you're doing with your decks. So, if you're new to Arkham Horror the card game, then that's probably pretty welcome. This seems like a very good pickup if you are just getting into the game or don't want to play the campaigns that are just really kind of over the top in terms of the mechanics and um, new all kinds of things, keywords to pay attention to. This is just much, much more simpler. But that's not always a bad thing, but it's not always a good thing. All right, that's kind of my review so far. Like I said, I've enjoyed it. Enjoying the game is really what it's all about, and I've had a good time playing it. I haven't gone through the whole thing. Last year when I did my review of Feast of Hemlock Vale, my group and I went through the whole campaign within the first 3 days of it being released, and I don't think that was a good experience for me or my group. So we decided to take it a little bit slow, and all I've got to say is what I've gone through with these 5 scenarios. I know a lot of people have played it, maybe even multiple times by now, but I'm taking it slow. That means I've got a lot more to say. I've had a lot more time to ruminate over the design and the scenarios themselves. So strap in. I'm going to talk as much as I can without going into too much detail about the scenarios themselves. I just want to kind of give you an overview about what the mechanics are like in each scenario and whether or not I felt like the design team did a good job pulling off what they're trying to do. So here we go. I'm gonna talk about the campaign itself. Now there's a couple of new things here that, at least so far, have not been all that important. I think there's a strong tendency in the campaign to give you lots of things that you might do, but you might not. And what I mean by that is stretch goals. Arkham Horror has always been a game about seeing how much you can pull off, whether it's the victory points, whether it's some secret special endings or scenarios, or just calling it quits. Sometimes you can resign in scenarios and say, you know what? It's better to resign than to keep pushing it. Taking trauma, other bad things that happen on defeat, maybe not worth it. In this campaign, I found that it's pretty easy to just get to the end. Just get to the end of the scenario and be done with it. But the artifacts and alien glyphs are your stretch goals. They really want you to get them, and I don't know why. I'm going to find out later. But of course, they come often with victory points or some other benefits in the future. Story assets for the artifacts, which you can pretty much everything I've seen in the middle of the campaign has been about using them. But these alien glyphs, the second part here, in the campaign guide are all about filling out what's here in the back, which I've not filled out. We'll use a copy of this, of course. But this whole section here, you see these glyphs during the scenarios and you are asked to translate them. They give you the translation. Again, I don't know what this does yet or when it's checked, but there are, I believe, 25 or 26, something like that, which you can make your own guesses as to what that probably means. I think I have my own ideas. Anyway, as we'll see in a lot of the encounter cards I'll show here, sometimes you just are told, translate this glyph. Great, you've done it. And then you can move on. And there's a lot of them in the campaign, and they check your progress. At least in one scenario I've seen, they check the progress of how many we've done throughout the whole campaign, which I think is kind of neat. So the more you do, the better. All right. The campaign starts in Arkham. And this scenario, which is called One Last Job, actually uses a whole lot of cards from the core set. All these are old. This is the scenario itself, One Last Job, and then this is a new one. I don't know what it's called. I guess I can see here. It's called Dreams. Just called Dreams. We're going to look at this one because I really enjoyed this encounter set. We'll talk about it when we talk about this scenario a little bit more. But you get to see all of your old friends in terms of the locations in Arkham. Downtown, Rivertown, Easttown, everyone's favorite location in the game. But then there's a few new things. Tillinghast, Esoterica, so you're part of the story here. You are doing one last job for Tillinghast, and you're trying to deal with a little bit of gang conflict in the streets of Arkham. I won't get into that too much, but this was a good scenario. It is a very interesting opening scenario because you are looking for enemies, and the agenda actually tells you that you can find them if you want, because you're supposed to talk to them. I see if I have the act here as well. Yeah, that's Act 2. Yeah, here we go. Act 1, again, you are supposed to put clues on here, and the only way to do that is to parlay. You can take a look at the card here. Parlay with criminal enemies. So you're looking for enemies, you're looking to talk to them, you put your own clues there. Lots of clues on locations. It's just the normal Arkham locations. I found that it was kind of difficult to find them. There weren't that many enemies in the deck. Instead, you find a bunch of rats. But when you do get these gang soldiers, for example, there's not much to do with them except for try to talk with them. So some parlaying involved. Not as much fighting as we had thought. Eventually, though, you make it to one random location. It's either going to be Hibbs Roadhouse or the Clover Club Lounge, and you might run into some other bigger enemies by then, and then you do end up being with both Naomi O'Banion and Sadie Sheldon, which is kind of neat. It was a kind of neat little thing to do at the end there about how to try to get them both in the victory display. Ultimately, what I found interesting about the scenario was that it has almost nothing to do with the rest of the story so far. In fact, it's just like a prologue. A prologue, I mean, it's a real scenario. It's a full scenario with VP and all the rest, and you use your own deck, so it's not like the prologues or preludes, but it really didn't have any introduction to this campaign or the campaign mechanics. Again, that's fine if they want to do that sometimes, but to me, the strongest opening scenarios of this game have all been ones that teach you something about what's to come. Something special about the game's mechanics that they want you to think about. Whether that was the Scarlet Keys, where you were introduced to concealed cards in a very friendly way, but actually still challenging. Ice and Death Part 1 in Edge of the Earth, what gave you kind of an idea of what the first three scenarios would all be about, but also just the mechanics with the partners and supplies, and all of that was done very well. I think Innsmouth, Pit of Despair, very, very strong opening scenario. Difficult, but also gives you a flavor for the kinds of enemies you're going to run into the whole rest of the campaign. This one, the only thing that we get that's not from the core set, and stuff that's really has nothing to do with the rest of the campaign, at least as far as I can tell, is this Dreams encounter set, which is why I wanted to talk about it. I thought these were all really good encounter cards, and I'm not sure I can say the same about the rest of the encounter cards that we're to see in the next scenarios. This one, at least, we see again. This one's a willpower test. You get +2 difficulty if you've got fewer cards in your hand. So we played George. I'm George, Lucius, and Michael McGlenn. That's our 3-player team. And often campaigns that come out with, of course, the investigators alongside, they try to target those investigators in particular. That is very true, that we get something that cares about your number of cards in hand. So George is not a fan of this. Losing the cards, not so bad. Direct horror, not so bad, but difficult to pass the test. And the other card that's in here, since there's 3 of these and 3 of these drawn to darkness, and maximum hand size is reduced by 3 to a minimum of 1. That's really scary for George. I hope this is coming across okay in the camera here. It's probably a little better. I've got the sleeves on some cards here. When your turn ends, if you don't have any cards in hand, you got to use them all up, then you discard this card. That is very, very tough if you are not George. George, you can do this. You can get rid of enough cards, but then getting them back is kind of annoying. On the other hand, maybe reducing your hand size by 3 isn't a big deal in other investigators. So I like this one. I'm just a little disappointed that you don't do much, I would say, related to the rest of the campaign. Didn't really set up much other than some of the story. So you do get a glyph if you do something in this scenario, which I guess is maybe a preview of what we do later, but it's not enough for me to give it that many points. What you do is go immediately to Interlude 1, an offer you can't refuse, where Tillinghast is basically telling you, hey, you got to go do this thing for me. Go to Rilia, which is this, the drowned city indeed, which is most of the campaign is just going around Rilia. And I like that, and I don't like that, but the thing we have to do first is choose a task. So we're given all of these tasks. We chose the ones that are right here. Plumb the depths. This one is if you discover the last clue, you get to remove an obsession. You need to do this 5 times to fulfill your task. Good money. You need to have 5 or more resources here. So when you gain a resource, you could put it here instead. And then No Place Like Home. This one is revealing locations. So those are the 3 we went with. The other ones seem really cool too, but kind of hard to pull off with our team. They all have, of course, when you complete the task, something on the back that is a benefit, which you may or may not want to look at. So replayability, like I said before, seems to come from the scenarios themselves, but also what you're doing with your investigators and telling their story. And I think the tasks and choosing different tasks is part of that. So you do this, and then you immediately go to Rilia. That's it. There's nothing. There's no story about getting there. It just happens. You one day you leave on this expedition. Oh, and by the way, this was hilarious. If you decide to not take him up on the offer, then you just lose the campaign. It's right away. Just you can play the first scenario and then be done. Okay. Interlude 2 is just we went to Rilia. Here you are. And we have our, I mean, it's surprising, right? Like there was nothing on the boat, nothing to talk about here. I think they took the people don't want to read a little bit too much to heart. And it feels like this campaign has less reading than usual and less story. And I'm not going to say people complained about there being too much reading and now people are complaining there's not enough reading. I don't think these are the same people complaining, honestly. But really, it feels like there is something missing here that helps us buy into the story. And maybe we don't need the story. I'm not playing the games for the writing here. I'm playing it more for the emergent narrative. So it's not the worst, but it just feels like there may have been stuff that was written and then someone came along later and said, you know what, there's too much text. Let's just chop it out. And it feels a bit jarring to go from a lot of what happened in Arkham to be just, the whole expedition might be several months and then suddenly you're there. We made it. Okay. However, we have a cool choice here. The replayability in this campaign is principally going to come from whether or not you decide to have a Western expedition following Andy. Andy is one of the 2 story allies that you get, or you do a Eastern expedition and you follow Ruby. We decided to follow Ruby, and I'll show you Andy as well, just so you're aware. We also have some expedition assets that we'll look at in a second. So we decided to go with Ruby. Very, very good ally here. You can see +1 agility, and then being able to move as a free triggered ability under some conditions. Expensive, but that seems about right. Andy is the other guy you can take. So here they both are. Very similar in terms of the stat boost, but the spread of stats is different. And this, if your location has no clues on it, ignore the first attack opportunity made against you each round. How is that anywhere comparable to just a free move? That's crazy. I don't get that. I don't know how. Why would you want this guy? I don't know. But maybe that's just a little bit harder. It does seem sometimes that the campaigns are not perfectly balanced, but rather different routes are indeed a difficulty level difference. So here's how this goes. You either go to the Western Wall if you're going on the Western Expedition, which is immediately starting on the next page. Or you go to the Obsidian Canyons, which is what we did, and we go basically to the back of the campaign guide and go here. The idea, and let's look at the map. Oof, there's all kinds of stuff here we don't look at. Okay, let's look at the map at the back here. Essentially, you are starting, somewhere here, and either you're going to go through Aurelia this way or the other way. And I really like this map here. I'll just make that a little bit bigger so people can sort of see what I'm talking about. They've done a good job of basically a clockwise or counterclockwise direction. So you have all of the same scenarios available to you, except you're playing them in a different order. So linear compared to the very open Hemlock Vale, somewhat open Scarlet Keys. We went to Obsidian Canyons. So what the designers needed to do to make this work is that there's 2 versions of each scenario, except for I think the one in the middle, which is the same. And they need to be doable at the different XP levels. So if this is a scenario 2, you'd only have so many XP. And is it also interesting on the other route? That is the challenge. How much difference there is in setup. They, of course, get a lot of replayability and reusability of the cards, but I'm not sure it was always worth it. In other words, sometimes it was kind of confusing playing one version of it, not knowing what the other version was like, because it didn't always make sense what was going on. Because, and again, I don't think this is a good thing when they could maybe print more cards to say, okay, this is what you're supposed to do on this direction, and you don't need some of these cards that are just completely unhelpful the other direction. I will make that more clear when we get there, but the difficulty level, or at least just the experience, doesn't have to be particularly balanced either way, because you want to try it the other direction and see what new things there are. But it does need to, it needs to still make sense. This Obsidian Canyons one, so you can see there's kind of 2 different setups here. I don't want to talk about this one too much, but in the location placements, so there's an Act 1 here for setting up your locations, which I thought was a lot of fun in this scenario. And then there's an Act 2, but there is no Act 3 in the direction that we went. In Eastern direction, there is no Act 3. In the other way, I assume there is. So this one's okay. Like, you just have to pay attention to, there were some cards that said something about like which row you're paying attention to, and sometimes they referred to row 4, and we never had a row 4. There was just rows 1 through 3, and that wasn't a mistake that you made. It's just that the card is being used double duty for one version and another version. One thing I did like a lot about these scenarios is that even if you are playing them with different investigators and choosing different tasks, you're not done with just do the thing on your task, right? It's not simply you need to reveal a location 5 times or whatever it is. You needed to actually do some other setup or sometimes resolutions based on which tasks you took. I didn't expect this. I did not know coming into this campaign that the tasks were going to be more tied to particular scenario setups and resolutions. Without going into them too much, they give you additional ways to make progress on your task or erase progress to give you something else to strive for. And I found that compelling. I think that was well done in these scenarios. Okay. I will say that the first chunk of scenarios that we played all had a similar rhythm. You need to move around and basically get locations that spawn some relics or glyphs. Looks something like this. So often in this campaign, they are either locations themselves, and let's see if there's one out here that was just on the location. Okay, this one, for example, you put something into play. That's maybe the one we just saw here. One of these set aside things. Oh, it's a different set aside location into play. That's what this one is. So you have to do something on the location, and then it gives you a glyph location to put into play. Sometimes they pick up a glyph treachery and put it into play, and then you do some sort of test on it or take some other action on it to resolve the other side, which is just you discover this glyph. And then sometimes some story asset. I don't honestly understand the difference between why they made some of them story assets, some of them treacheries, some of them just literally on location. In other scenarios, they're actually on enemies. I think that's interesting, but yeah, here's one. It's just you just spend clues, discover the glyph. Like, what's the difference between this and this? They're the same thing, except for they wanted to give you more story text, I guess, that they could only fit on the backside. Maybe. The treachery one, this one, I think in this scenario can only go to a particular location, but it's very possible that in other scenarios that's not the case, where sometimes you could attach to any location, and that's kind of cool, I guess. Obsidian Canyons in general is a fun scenario because of this location shifting mechanic. It was a little confusing at first to read what was going on with the summit deck because they needed to use cards from outside the scenario as placeholder cards, and that was at first a little bit weird. I was like, are these actually treacheries or not? And they're not. But these locations come in and out of play, so part of the tension is can you get these locations and get the glyph on them before they leave play. I won't get into the more details about some rulings where people have noticed rightly that some locations with victory can leave play before they're told to put them in the victory display, which feels a little bad. But the whole reason you might want to do this scenario first is because the artifact that you pick up is this thing, the Obsidian Claw. And this is crazy. During your turn, exhaust this card and choose a location up to 2 locations away. Move to it. Then there is an ability to flip this card, which you cannot do unless you've translated all of the glyphs here. So there are some artifacts where you cannot do anything on it until you've translated all the glyphs. Actually, I think they all do something. It's just everything that's below, any ability below the line of glyphs, you can't do anything with it. Now, we actually didn't get all those glyphs, so I've not flipped it over, but you know what? A free 2 moves every round? That's crazy. I don't know why they printed that thing. It's just an auto take. You just make a beeline to picking that thing up, and then you're basically good to go. Okay, the next scenario I played was this one, Court of the Ancients. And now is a good time to tell you that the opening of a lot of these tells you to pick up a artifact or item asset from the expedition set aside stuff. So you can choose, would you like to start with the Obsidian Claw in play? Why, yes, you would. Why would you not do this? These maps tend to be fairly big. There's lots of randomized locations. Moving around, even if it's backtracking, is extremely, extremely valuable. But you have some other options. You could take a diving suit. That's 3 health, and it's kind of like the one in Innsmouth, where if you get any damage on you, you got to place it here instead. You can ignore the flooded locations. Basically, if they're fully flooded, it's as if they were partially flooded. That's a little bit different, I think, than the Innsmouth ones. You always have that. 3 health is pretty good to have. But then there's some other stuff you could take. And we tried taking all of these and were mostly disappointed. This one lets you translate the glyphs a little bit better, 4 times. This one lets you take an action to heal a damage. But you could also just remove it from the game and then just move a non-elite enemy away. That seems probably better. Laudanum, we've taken this one a few times just in case for healing horror. It shouldn't really be your answer. But this is better than the other one because you might as well take the diving suit if you want to care about damage. Unless you have one of those weaknesses that makes you heal. Anyway, it's got a other effect as well, which seems okay. It's funny to get these sorts of things. I have taken the diving suit every time, except for the one time I tried the glyphs, and then I was disappointed. And it's just good. Yeah, this one we tried once, and I just never used it. Turns out George Barnaby can pass tests any day of the week. Okay, Court of the Ancients itself is not my favorite scenario. In fact, it was the weakest one that I played. And probably the reason why is I think the other direction is more interesting. This one has basically an elevator that you're moving up and down. We started here and we had to move down here and then just get out. You just need to get a bunch of clues and kind of it. Strangely, once you like at the very beginning, you get a big enemy. Must be here somewhere. Yeah, this colossal tyrant. Basically is there from almost turn 1. And it seems like a problem. And it says here, force when the enemy phase ends. If there are no investigators at its location, you deal direct horror at every card of sanity at each adjacent location. Why would you do this? You have to leave someone there to fight it or evade it. Well, not just to evade, you have to leave someone there to babysit it. But why wouldn't you? It's a lot of health, but you just do it. You have enough time, at least in my opinion. And he's a bigger problem if you don't just try to kill him. It was just a strange tempo where there was no reason to even bother with that forced effect, because even if it didn't have it, there's a massive enemy that stays in the lift the entire time. And it would be a big problem if you just tried to get around him the whole time. So I don't know what happened in playtesting there, but it was just bizarre. We sat around, killed him, and then moved about our merry way. I think the previous scenario too did this, but you start to get random victory point enemies in these. So they're all from this Star Spawn set. We can check them out later, but I think that's kind of neat that we get some unknown enemies every time. But what I didn't like about the scenario was it just felt very, I don't want to say repetitive, but I didn't often feel like we knew what we were doing. We just kind of were exploring every level, and none of the locations were particularly interesting. They were just locations with clues, and once we had tons, we probably could have just left. But we didn't really know that. And I don't think the encounter deck composition made as much sense as I would have liked. We haven't seen them yet, and I think I've only seen them in one other scenario later, or maybe even not. There is a Doom cultist set, kind of like the Acolytes and whatnot in the original core set. And they're in this set, but there's no Doom mechanics in this one. It's just, here are some Pilgrim Acolytes that if they attack you, you place 1 Doom on it. Huh? Well, don't let them attack you, but even if they do attack you, you just kill them the next round. And then the Doom is gone. Okay, well, there's 3 of those guys. This guy, the Pilgrim Leader, who actually didn't come out until the very end, which might make a difference here, It makes those other guys tougher, I guess. Not really, though. I mean, makes them forfight. And relentless means that they probably attack you twice and then get 2 doom. But these guys don't spawn on empty locations. That's the thing. You're not, I mean, this guy does, but these guys don't like the original acolytes do. So I don't know. They're just here. And nothing else in the set, in this scenario, cares about doom. If I recall correctly, the doom threshold was kind of crazy. Yeah, it was like 8, I think, for that one. And maybe there was Agenda 3. One was 6, and 2 is 8. Yeah, plenty of time. I don't think the doom mechanic made a whole lot of sense there. But you know what? Maybe they're just padding out the encounter deck. That's unfair. I just think that maybe the other direction it made more sense. I'm not sure. In fact, actually, it doesn't say that. It says that you only get it on this direction. Well, okay. One guy that does show up here, who we didn't see before. No, we did see him in the City of Canyons too. But he shows up here as well, is this set, which is a little bit more memorable. This is the Inescapable. And this guy does spawn at connecting locations, so you have to go run after him. And he's got this ability that is, first time the Elder Thing token is revealed from the Chaos Bag, you ready it and resolve its 100 keyword. Doesn't attack, but that's still pretty cool. Easy to evade, so you kind of want to, but then maybe you kind of don't. He comes with 3 treacheries, still behind you. They're all the same here. You test 2 agility, +1 difficulty for each copy of this in the victory display. If you fail, if it's in play, notice this guy has victory 0, then he moves and goes to your location. If he's not in play, you even grab him from the victory display and spawn it. Well, spawns a connecting location, and then this goes into the victory display. The other ones are more difficult. Sometimes these go in the victory display on their own with agenda or act flips, I think. So this starts to get added to the encounter decks. I don't remember when it is. Maybe it's at the beginning. Yeah, it seems like at the beginning. No. Out of play. Okay. But still a pretty cool idea to have a, inescapable enemy. Reminds me a bit of Circle Undone. Circle Undone tries this tactic as well, saying that, hey, we've got this Spectral Watcher. But I don't think this guy's quite as interesting as a Spectral Watcher, because Spectral Watcher can't leave play. This guy you can, and then you just have to avoid drawing these things later, which you can do. Okay. Cool. I'm not sure it is perfect, but I mean, I appreciate the effort here. And there's something more with him in the next scenario as well. Okay, that's this scenario. It's just going up. Okay, yeah, let me make this more clear. There's some stuff with this one which I didn't understand, because maybe the other direction is more important. But we literally just went down the elevator, checked out every level, went to the next level, went to the next level. That was it. There were some abilities here that made it seem like you might be moving the elevator up and down, but we never did it. And it made me wonder if I was playing things right, or maybe it's going the other direction that makes it more likely for that to happen. I don't know. But again, the mileage you get out of repeating using the cards here could be a problem, because now you confuse people playing with text that is irrelevant to you. Okay, that's just my opinion. You do get another relic or artifact from this one. That's the shard. This guy allows you to ignore an attack. And then there's an ability at the bottom, which lets you exhaust the enemy. Okay. Okay, then the next one was the Grand Vault. And I liked this one a lot more. I found that this was a pretty engaging scenario, although it's sort of similar to the previous one, because there's a moving platform that moves around the map. Looks like this. And it is only connected to locations that are adjacent to it. So essentially what you needed to do, and we kind of solved this quickly, was you moved it and then you just went to the connecting locations and you go around in a circle because you need to go to all the locations, especially this location over here, and eventually you go to the middle. Again, it was kind of solved because there was a little bit of discussion we had about like, okay, who's going to move off of it, but kind of you can move it twice because you move it and the original location that was there moves back to where it was. So you can kind of like move it twice and then go back and forth, and then you're kind of done. Using that obsidian claw is kind of crazy with it too. The shroud here on the moving platform is pretty low, and this was the first scenario where there actually was some flood token mechanics. The one we just saw actually was very strange, where the flooding went away after the agenda flipped. So I guess it was just a red herring or something. This one, the flooding actually mattered, but you can't flood this location, this one, maybe the original location either. So we never really found ourselves in the flooded location, so that was kind of strange because you're encouraged just to stay on the moving platform, so we did. But I enjoyed sort of just playing through this one, mostly because we got a new encounter set. This one, which had this persistent construct. This guy is a nightmare. There's 3 of them, and there's some other things here too. So when you defeat this enemy, spawn each other persistent construct in the victory display exhausts your location. So basically, you kill this one, it goes in the victory display. Then you kill this one, then you get this guy back, exhausted, this guy goes. And potentially you draw a 3rd one. Yeah. Now, the way to defeat them, or defeat this problem, is you leave them somewhere where they can't use the hunter keyword. Because remember, the moving platform is connected to the ones adjacent, but nothing else is actually connected to each other. So you can go leave them behind on some other location and just never go back there. And if you never make anything connected to that location, it'll never move. So it's kind of okay. Other tech you can do for it, of course, to make sure enemies don't move, but I thought that was a pretty cool enemy. And yet the scenario had a good solution for it. And so it didn't feel like it was that big of a deal. Really, this is more like a friend for Lucius Galloway to just mine for clues and cards for that matter. Not terrible, but it reminded me a lot of the Vengeful Serpents in Return of the Forgotten Age. I think a lot of people are saying that. And I like them way better. This guy is annoying, but doesn't really give you, in my opinion, an interesting, different play pattern. I mean, you just evade them and walk away, right? You just do that. If you do want to defeat them, I guess you can use Dynamite Blast and get rid of them all at once, but you also just, have to leave anyway, so just leave. Okay. That was pretty cool. I mean, I thought it was a fun scenario, but it did get a little bit repetitive that you're just going around until you spend all the clues and get all the glyphs, which is pretty much this campaign. Except for this one, which was the apiary. You know what? Hang on. I should say one more thing about the Grand Vault, because we're doing spoilers here. I thought there was a really cool thing in this one with the Inescapable, which is you have the potential to just defeat it entirely. And I think that is the Vault Core. Core of the Vault. If you can manage to get the Inescapable here and defeat him here, then you get to say that the creature was defeated, which was super cool. We did it. We did it. And the way we did it, he was sitting in the victory display the entire game. And on the last turn that we thought we could even manage to do this before resigning, we were just trying to dig out this treachery and fail it. And our group has never cheered a -1 so hard. I think it was a -1. Anyway, then we killed it again. It was fun to do that just because we could. But yeah, that's all I'll say about that scenario, I suppose. Let's move on to the apiary, which I think was also a good scenario because it was kind of different. This was a scenario where a lot of locations are in the encounter deck. And you're just trying to draw them. And when you do, then you get to go into them. And you're trying to do as much of this as possible and pick up, different story items, different locations with glyphs on them. That's basically what you're doing. However, the story for this one, when we were reading through what was happening in the interludes and on the acts and agendas, was extremely, extremely. It was hardcore. This is, you can kind of see in the picture here what's going on here. This is, hatchlings of all kinds of crazy aliens, and it was scary. And the interlude was kind of nutty. I don't want to talk about it too much because you should just play this one. This is the location we had here with something rotating, and we had an enemy that was called Mother. It was great. I think this was a fantastic scenario, done extremely well. And maybe it feels a little, repetitive to just keep digging through the deck and getting locations with clues and whatnot, but it felt like we were pushing forward into locations we didn't know about. I didn't know what the map looked like, and that was really cool. It also might have helped that this had striking fear in it, which the original scenario that we played, One Last Job, did as well. And now is a good time to switch over to talking about just the encounter cards in general. That, to me, striking fear is still one of the scariest encounter sets. It just does so much. And I think there's a couple of good encounter sets here, but not like that one. That one is a banger. So part of what makes the campaign a little bit easier is maybe I was playing a really good investigator. But let's take a look. So this is one of the sets which has just 2 cards, Cyclopean Architecture and Crumbling Masonry. So this one deals you damage. There's a ton of agility tests in this campaign. Not surprising when most of the investigators have a pretty high agility score. And then sometimes intellect is tested as well. But they're still pretty friendly. Like, the printed shrouds are not that high. I don't think I ran into any 5 shroud locations. Printed shroud, of course, bypasses things like obscuring fog. Of course, it bypasses breach the door as well. But yeah, like, this isn't that bad. I never really failed this. Maybe I did once on an auto fail, but not that big of a deal for anyone on our team. Taking a couple damage, not that big of a deal either. These were pretty soft. This one was in maybe just one scenario we played so far. This one tests combat, so hey, we have another thing to test a different stat altogether. You can either take 2 horror or deal 1 direct damage to investigate your location. 1 direct damage, that's it? To anyone? That's not bad. There's a couple of those. There's this one, there's 1 copy of this. You can either lose 1 action, everyone loses an action, discard 2 cards, or place a doom. This is the only Ancient Evils type card I've seen so far, and there's only 1 of them. And then here's Printed Shroud, take 2 horror, so it's like this one. But there's only 2 copies, and I haven't seen it all over the place. Again, taking 2 horror and doing a test based on Shroud ain't bad, but think about Edge of the Earth that has a couple of these effects, but also, like, if you draw a Frost token, you get another horror or damage. That's a bit tougher, I think. So those are not too bad. Corrosive Fog. This is another one that we see a lot of. You have a choice of which test you want to take. If you fail, only take a damage, but if you fail more, then instead it's actually kind of bad. Dealing direct damage to everything is really bad. So that one's tougher, but it kind of combos with this Elder Mist. By the way, you'll notice that a lot of things are hazards. I noticed this and took Protective Gear, the Guardian Survivor asset that cancels hazards. So maybe things have felt a little bit easier since I don't want to say teched for it, I just noticed it. That's those. Crumbling Mimicry is part of another encounter set. Again, just 2 of a couple things. No, it wasn't always likely that monsters happened. You know that whole Relentless thing that's in the campaign guide? So far, haven't noticed it doing much. Things just die or we evade them. Okay, I have the Deep. This one is interesting. You treat each tablet or cultist token as a Elder Thing token instead. I've almost never gotten rid of this card. I'm okay with, sometimes having a different token, which isn't so bad. On standard difficulty, probably fine. On hard or expert, probably awful. Okay, so not too scared about those. And I think the last one that I've seen is this set about flooding. So you get to choose whether or not you want to take a fairly tough test. But again, the penalty isn't bad. Damage in a horror. There's actually a benefit if you succeed. And then this one, you could just take a damage and discard an asset. That takes up a slot. So something in the water, increase the flood level, surge. I think it's good that these have surge. And it's the nearest eligible, not just yours. And additional cost to play a card, spend a resource, take a horror. If your location is not flooded, this one automatically succeeds. This we just kept getting rid of on the moving platform because it's never flooded. So I don't know. I just found that these didn't have a whole lot of teeth. We haven't seen much by far as enemies. They seem to be more encounter cards based on the scenario set based, not shared ones. These guys don't have much health and they're aloof. This was slightly annoying, but it wasn't that bad. 3 of those. I think this is maybe the most difficult one to deal with. Okay, I think that's everything. Yeah, honestly, like this set, the Dreams one from the very beginning, was my favorite, and we've seen it a few times, but I don't know what's going to come up in the next few scenarios. We have to do still the Drowned Quarter, the Western Wall, and then we'll see where we go from there. Like I said, I'm enjoying a lot about this campaign. I'm enjoying just playing decks that I don't feel like I needed to make perfect for this particular campaign. Where's the front here? In other words, this is one of the few campaigns that I would say you can do anything. You really can. And there's not much that the campaign is asking you to do. Maybe movement, maybe agility tests every now and then, just to make things a little bit more, go a little more smoothly. But I feel like even getting the stretch goals, like every glyph and everything, has not been taxing. We missed one in the Obsidian Canyons because we didn't have much choice. We didn't really know what we were doing in that one as much. But everything else has been just kind of going through. I'm looking forward to how it ends. But sometimes Arkham is just a lot of fun because you are getting to play your decks and playing with some friends. And that is for sure what has been going on in our playthrough. And I'm very curious what the other direction is like. The Western direction might be harder, might just be different. You don't get to have the Obsidian Claw in every scenario. I mean, it's a good card. I just don't really understand why they printed it and gave it to you so early. Okay, that's it for me for my first thoughts. I will chime in again once I've finished the campaign and say a little bit more. Right now, I feel like it's in... I like all the scenarios so far. One I didn't care for as much, but none of them made me angry to play. The setup instructions, the general mechanics, whatever mechanics they are not too bad. Pretty easy to understand, pretty easy to get through. I had some issues with the Hemlock Vale scenarios being a little bit fiddly and a bit too much, but on a second run through, I would be happy to play every single scenario here. So that is a good sign. I just think it's a bit too safe for someone who's played every campaign already. But you know what? It's not bad. All right. I'll see you next time.